Hello, welcome to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. In today's episode, I'm building the Sunstep. This will be the last piece to be blended into the face of Undercrag Mountain. It's a simple construction from foam board, clay and sand, but it marks a significant milestone in our journey together. This is Undercrag City. By now, many of you will be familiar with this process. I start with a piece of foam board. I'm just cutting a piece that's about the right size, and I'm slicing it into roughly the right shape. The Sunstep will sit in this space here, directly above the upside down windmill. So I sketch around with a pencil and then roughly cut the shape I want at an angle to suit the slope of the cliff later on. And now it's time for some concept sketching. This is about my usual standard of planning. I want the Sunstep to have access from above Undercrag, so I'm putting in a staircase. I cut a piece of 30mm XPS foam and then mark the line of my stairs. I've added in some foam board to give a guideline for height. This piece needs to line up with what's above it. I've roughly cut the slope of my stairs and tidied it up a little. And now I'll continue to play with ideas. When I think I know where everything's going, I'm peeling the paper off the foam board everywhere that I want hand-drawn stones. I'm cutting some more steps, very roughly from more foam board, to lead up to the morning stone. More about that later. Cutting more steps into the foam board now. This is all very rough for a wonky, old appearance, like everything in Undercrag City. As you can see, I'm not planning, I'm just playing with ideas. More or less sketching in 3D. Anyway, when I'm happy with my pieces, I glue them together. Back to my main staircase. Time to cut the stairs. A vertical and a horizontal, and a vertical and a horizontal, all the way down. I'm cutting these in a deliberate, irregular fashion. This staircase is also far wider than the final piece will be. That's to allow for working over the edges with clay. Happy with the stairs for now? Let's think about the front wall. My thinking here is that whoever built the Sunstep found a fissure in the rock and exploited it, cutting a staircase and finally building a wall across the open mouth. I've cut an arch in some foam board. I'm exposing only the areas I want my stonework to go. I want columns either side of my arch. Now with my components cut, I can play around with the rest of the model. I want to add some more details. While I'm messing around with this foam board, it's a good time to ask you that if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Your liking, subscribing and sharing really helps to grow the channel. And as always, please do leave comments and questions. I answer every single one, and I really enjoy hearing from you. Thank you for your support. I'm going to add an extra small doorway inside the space. This gives access to the stairwells and caverns below. And once I'm happy with my layout, I'll add another wall to enclose the space where the stairs will go. I'm going to work on that little door now. I'm using a piece of rigid black card, the same stuff I always use, covering it with balsa. And then I'll draw in planks using a pencil, very roughly by hand. Then I'll glue that into place behind my archway. This is very quick and very easy. I also want to make my front wall thicker and detail it on the inside. Best way of doing this is to add more foam board. If I strip the paper off both sides and draw into it, the foam board becomes quite fragile. So a matching archway, strip off the paper, and glue the two pieces together. This is by far the simplest piece I've made in quite a while. I need to colour this door and add its details before I fit it into the model, just to make life easier for myself. So a coat of brown ink and let that dry. While that is drying, I'm drawing my stonework. Just by hand with an HB pencil. and the stairs. Again, these are deliberately wonky. And the top. And on we go. All of the stonework everywhere. This is not actually as time-consuming as it looks. And it means that every section of stone in Undercrag City is completely unique. My brown ink has dried, so some quick dry brushing with a pale yellow, followed by some white. And I'll let that dry. Move on to my stonework. Everything gets a coat of dark grey. These paints are just test pots or samples of standard house paint. They're not expensive hobby paints. There's a huge range available and they work out very, very cheap. Brown ink over my dry brush door, and I'll let that dry again. And dry brush my stonework, light grey, followed by white. There, my door's dry. I'm going to add some hardware. In this case, iron bands in the form of very thin black card. The PVA will dry clear. It won't be as messy as it looks right now. A touch of silver paint, not too much. And a touch of rust ink. My stonework is all done and dry brushed, and you can see the round shape of the morning stone right at the front. I'm gluing my various pieces together. I've added an archway at the foot of the stairs with a couple of extra little steps to line everything up. Looking pretty good so far. Now I'm going to stone texture the interior. Covered everything with PVA, and I'm blobbing red Das clay in, being careful not to catch my door. I smooth and shape the clay with more PVA and a brush. This prevents the clay from cracking, and it keeps it malleable while I'm working. And finally, I'll press the front wall into place temporarily to give myself an indent. On the subject of clay, I mentioned some time ago I'd had a mishap with a cheaper brand. As you can see, there's a lot of cracking in the High Keep Cavern district, This occurred about 3 days after I finished the model. So now I've had to go in with PVA and more clay, fill the gaps, and fix everything up. This is far more fiddly than when I was building it in the first place. I will only use DAS clay from now on. And no, I'm not sponsored by them. Getting the sand into place was particularly tedious. I even tried painting it on with glue and a brush. There's barely room to move a teaspoon in here. Anyway, back to my stairs. More blobs of clay, shaping and sculpting and adding. And everywhere where the wall meets the ground, or where I want mosses, I'm adding more PVA, and I'll sprinkle sand onto this. Then it's back to the good old dark grey paint. Much of what I'd already painted, I'm painting over again. That's fine, it's part of the process. It's easier to go over grey than yellow foam when you're working in such tight spaces. Making sure I don't leave any red showing. And just as an extra little touch, I'm going to add an LED poking through the clay where it will become impossible to see later. I've added sand to my front wall as well, to hide the joins between the different layers. Time for more dry brushing. When everything's been dry brushed, everything gets a thin black wash. This is 1 part black ink to 16 parts water. Same recipe I've used throughout the entire model. As usual, it looks very dark, but it'll fade as it dries. While that's wet, I'm adding green and then yellow wherever I want my mosses. Again, this is a technique you'll have seen me use many times. But I think this helps to illustrate the point that even a model as complicated in appearance as Undercrag City can still be constructed using very simple techniques and materials. You don't need 3D printing and expensive tools and equipment. With all those washes done, I can glue in the wall and close everything in. And I can start to build this into the rest of the mountain. I'm working with blocks of yellow foam that I've roughed up into a stone texture by slashing the surface with a knife and pulling it apart with my thumb. I've added a number of separate pieces, and I'll fill the gaps between them with more clay. The Sunstep and the Morning Stone play a particularly important role in the daily ritual of life in Undercrag City. Every morning, the priestess of Highchapel, with one chosen acolyte, makes the long walk from Highchapel to the Morning Stone, in time to greet the sun. The sun and dragons are closely linked in Undercrag lore. You can't have one without the other. At this point it's looking quite rough, but that's generally what happens just before things start to look really good. Now for some extra detail. This is the head of a cheap plastic dragon from a $2 shop that I've had lying around for years. It's from the same range as the dragon I built into the cliff wall outside the Undergate cavern. I'm blending it into the rock face with clay to make it look as if it's been carved out rather than just stuck on the front. And for some extra texture, my flat surfaces are getting earth. This is PVA and the same sand as earlier. It'll be painted brown instead of green. There's a novel way of getting sand onto the cliff face. I used to be able to lay the entire city on its side for this work, but I can't anymore. And it's back to the grey paint. In case you were wondering, the Sunstep is a long, long way up. With the grey dry, it's more dry brushing. The same techniques repeated over and over again. Nothing complicated, nothing particularly difficult. But it all starts to come together quite quickly now. My earth has been painted brown. I'm dry brushing with lighter tones. And finally a pale yellow. I've allowed the earth to build up on top of the dragon's head as well. It's been there a long time. Now for more ink washes. Here I do have to be careful. I don't want drops of black ink hitting my windmill below. And it's time for green. I don't paint the entire area I want, I just add some blobs, and they'll be washed out with yellow. This has the effect of giving a variety of different tones. Catching those drops before they fall. And working my way around. And I'll be working over the edges where this new piece meets what was already there. This is how the joins become seamless. Undercrag Mountain is more green than grey. The mosses and lichens get almost everywhere. A thin brown wash on my earth. Allowing things to overlap and run into each other. When all that's dry, all I need to do is add some vegetation. Bit of PVA. Some yellow flowers, very popular in Undercrag. And finally, a few sprinkles of static grass, lobbed on here and there. And a touch of gold paint for the morning stone. And there we are. The Sunstep, where the priestess of Highchapel ventures every single morning to welcome the sun to Undercrag City. And that completes Undercrag City. I'll be moving on very shortly to the Overcrag. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.